morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told out of Voice of Radio, so today I'm very, very, very excited. Partly because we've got a new Kato Stadium, and look, I have been saying this for a while. Somebody somewhere has decided that Kato should draw most of the stadiums nowadays, or at least a large chunk of them. And goodness gracious me, that decision was one of the best that's been made in the Pokemon TCG in quite a while. I get super excited every time we see one. We just saw Jubilee Village coming around recently over in Japan. That one was kind of nice. We're all playing Path to the Peak at the moment. There's a distinctive style. I'm all into it. And yeah, whoever decided that Kato should be drawing these stadiums is getting an awful lot of love from me right now, because I am absolutely loving them. For the first time in my life, I am getting legitimately excited about the art on stadium cards, and I'm actually now building up a collection of Kato stadiums with the reverse holos and all of that. How cool is that? Yeah, it's also a stunningly good stadium. Translations from the lovely Antoine Boulet. So what we've got here is Gapejaw Bog, which is a lovely name, and you will recognize, if you played Legends Arceus, you will recognize this place. Whenever a player puts a basic Pokemon from their hand to their bench, put 2 damage counters on that Pokemon. Yeah. Anyone spotted it before I say it? It's Team Magma's secret base, but it doesn't say other than Team Magma Pokemon. And to be fair, right, Team Magma Pokemon don't exist right now. Although, to be fair, you could now play this in Expanded, and we'll get to Gyarados in a minute. There is a comparison to be made there. But actually, just as a side note, Gyarados decks in Expanded can now play Team Magma's secret base, and they can play this. So if they want to have 8 potential stadiums, they can have them. That's actually really cool. But going back for the minute, what we've got is a stadium, and this is a super important stadium. Because what we have right now is a bunch of Pokemon that do extra damage if the defending Pokemon is damaged. This will work very nicely. So one of the decks I've been playing far too much of lately, and well, it's Jolteon VMAX, right? But my tip is, if you want a nice deck just to sit and ladder mindlessly, not quite mindlessly, but if you want a fast deck that is not the most complicated to play, just play Jolteon VMAX, just start banging out games in front of the telly. It's so much fun. But what Jolteon does is essentially, for a single energy time you bring an elemental badge, 100 to the active, 100 to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon with any damage counters on it. So you need damage counters on the bench Pokemon. Jolteon comes in nicely here. And the thing is, right, we've all been using things like Inteleon lately, and this is important because the Inteleon line, other than this one, is rotating out. You know, things like Drizzle, we're going to be leaving in, well, end of August, beginning of September. So we're going to need a new way to get the damage on. This will work. And we've seen that fusion decks are playing Fusion Strike energy, which stops you dropping damage counter with stuff like Inteleon. This isn't an issue with this stadium, but it can be played around. So what we essentially do is your opponent can just play their own stadium. Wait to bench a Pokemon. Now, if they wait too long, they're hurting themselves, and that's a win for you. But if your opponent's got a stadium in hand, they can just replace the stadium, bench, and they don't take the damage, and that sucks. But they're not always going to have the stadium. Most decks play 2 to 4. They're not always going to have the stadium. If they do, that's really sad, but you can't win them all. Obviously, Jolteon a lot of the time wants to play Path to the Peak. Look, you start the game with this, and then you move to Path to the Peak, unless Path to the Peak is super exciting and super important and all of that, in which case you play that and just play the longer game. Either is fine. My point is, for a deck like Jolteon, this is a great way to get the damage down, just so long as your opponent doesn't have a stadium. We could also look at Vaporeon, because Vaporeon VMAX does 200 damage, essentially for just a rapid strike energy, time you bring an elemental badge, and it does that as long as the defending Pokemon already has any damage counters on. So here, very simply, you should make sure they do have the damage counters on, and then would you believe it, you'll be fine. One of the cards I am very excited about in the near future, it's not actually out here though, it is out in Japan, is Hisuian Samurott. Does 110 damage for 2 energy, although bearing in mind you do have Dark Patch nowadays, so the 2 energy, or we will, you know, Japan does, we will by the time this comes out, so the 2 energy is not an issue. And then, yeah, 220 damage for essentially 1 energy if they've got any damage on. Well, this will make sure they've got the damage on. I mean, this with Hisuian Samurai is going to make a redonkulous speed deck. This is a really impactful stadium. And I've just given you a few examples. Jolteon is clearly a big one. Hisuian Samurai is clearly a big one. These are cards which are going to see play or are seeing play, and this stadium will make them way better. Sure, at the moment they've got Inteleon, but like I've said, by the time we get to the rotation, they're still going to have Inteleon, but they're not going to have the support that really makes it great. And this is less space in the deck, arguably more easily played around, but it's a great option, either instead of or as well as. And I've just scratched the surface. There are plenty of other cards that are out now or are coming out that will do extra damage if the Pokemon has damage on. Yeah, this is huge. This is a stadium you are going to see a lot of. It's a good job the artwork is so gosh darned good. But hey, are you looking for a partner who is tailor-made for it? You know, we had Gyarados with Team Magma's secret base. We need something similar here. We've got Bisharp. For what it's worth, the Pawniard, I should mention, a new Kamiya card. Not my favourite artist personally, but I know a bunch of people adore Kamiya. So it's worth pointing out there is a new card coming from that wonderful artist. But we're worried about the Bisharp here, and the Bisharp is good. It's not metal double colourless 90 damage, let's not be silly. For a single metal energy, 30 damage, plus 30 more for each damage counter on each of your benched Pawniard. I.e., if you've got 3 bench Pawniard, Pawniard. I've just checked the pronunciation. It's Pawniard. Sorry about that. So if you've got 3 bench Pawniard and you've got 2 damage counters on each, which with Gape-Jaw Bog should be pretty easy, then you have a total of 6 damage counters, 2 on each of the 3. Well, that's 180 damage. 6 damage counters times 30. Plus you've got the 30 base. You're up to 210 before we've even started. And 210 is enough to get most of your Pokemon V. Some have 220, a lot have 210. But then all you need to do is add a choice bout, and all of a sudden you're up to 240, and basically any Pokemon V at that stage should be going down. And weirdly, this is Gyarados. Like literally Gyarados. But you do 30 less. Gyarados did 30 base, plus 30 more for each damage counter on each of your bench Magikarp. Worth pointing out, Magikarp always have 30 HP, so you can only ever get 2 damage counters on them. Pawniard here, you actually can potentially get 5 damage counters on each, and then you've got 15 damage counters, and you're doing 450 damage for a single energy. That's not realistic, but it's just there as an option. Really, self-damaging in the game at the moment is quite awkward and annoying. Really, you're using Gape-Jaw Bog, and that's about it. I mean, I suppose you could be using Spikemuth, but this just seems like an easier way to do it. Although I need to give one more shout out to the lovely Antoine Boulet here, because they've pointed out something very interesting, and that is a combination of Old Cemetery and Cherim. Now, I'm slightly skeptical about this because this is another awkward combo, but you don't need the whole thing. Cherim lets you attach as much grass energy as you like during your turn to your Pokemon that don't have a rule box, like Pawniard. And Old Cemetery says that every time you attach an energy from your hand, which happens with Cherim, to one of your non-psychic Pokemon, and Pawniard aren't psychic, you take 2 damage counters. So in this way, you can actually attach 3 grass energy to each of your Pawniard, and put 6 damage counters on them, and then you're actually doing 180 damage per Pawniard you've got in play, which is ridiculous. At this stage, we do need to point out that this new Pawniard I'm talking about with 60 HP isn't going to do the trick, but we do have one that came around in Sword and Shield that has 70 HP. Admittedly, that one will be rotating out end of August, beginning of September, but you know, we've got it for the time being, and obviously a 70 HP Pawniard in the future is something we are definitely going to be looking out for. So yeah, that is a way you could legitimately do 180 per Pawniard, and honestly, you don't need any other damage modification at that point. You are doing a redonkulous amount of damage. Wouldn't it be great if we could have 4 Pawniard on our bench? Oh, hang on a second. What are you going to evolve into Bisharp here? And what you're going to evolve into Bisharp is... well, Zoroark. Remember, we've got the Zoroark from Evolving Skies that's got that really rather awesome ability that lets you swap it for any Stage 1 Pokemon in your discard pile. Cool. What's especially good here, you don't actually need to play 4 Bisharp. Like, if you get 1 Bisharp in your discard pile, then your first Zoroark turns into a Bisharp, gets KO'd, your second Zoroark can take that same Bisharp out the discard, and then your third can take the same one out the discard, and your fourth can take the same one out the discard. Basically, if you have 1 Bisharp in your discard pile, you can turn each of those 4 Zoroark in turn into Bisharp, which is amazing. Although, that only gives you 4 attackers, so yeah. Although to be fair, just play some recovery and then just get more Zoroark out. It's kind of nuts. But now if you do this, you actually can have 4 Pawniard on your bench. And that's kind of awesome. Because now, 4 Pawniard with 2 damage counters each, that's 8 damage counters. So you times that by 3, you're at 240. But you've got the 30 base, that's 270. You're already pretty much at the stage of getting KOs on any Pokemon V-Star. Not quite, but almost. Although, to be fair, remember, because you're using a stadium, most of your opponent's Pokemon should start with 2 damage on. So if you're hitting 270 with 4 Pawniard with 2 damage counters on each, it should actually be 290. And you look at something like Arceus V-Star, which is a big V-Star, they're all going down. What about V-Maxes? Because, 270 isn't quite enough. Well, you add 30 for Choice Belt. Now you're up to 300. Then you add 34 Hawlucha, or the Radiant Hawlucha, I should say, which does 30 more to Pokemon VMAX, and you're up to 330. And I know there are 1 or 2 VMAX that have 340. Don't forget they should have a couple damage counters on them already. And oh, look, ladies and gentlemen, everything's going down. Single Pokemon, single energy, and fine, it's a bit of a work and it is a little bit of a combo here, but you're a single energy stage 1 getting a 1-hit KO on a 2-prize V-Star. You should have to work for it. And this can legitimately work. Now, I can't tell you right now how good this deck is going to end up being. Testing is going to really determine that. But I'm telling you, we've got a legit single prize rogue deck coming in here. This one could end up being really good. Yes, you got to play it with Zoroark. Yes, you got to have the 4 Pawniard on your bench. Yes, you got to have the stadium, and Choice Bout is really important and all of that. This could legitimately work. Might end up being too awkward, but could legitimately work. The stadium, as far as I'm concerned, is a slam dunk home run 5 Wassy stadium. It's going to see play in a bunch of decks. There are a bunch of cards that are going to basically be viable because of it. And especially with Inteleon rotating out. Okay, Inteleon isn't, but again, things like Drizzle are, which makes it significantly worse. Some decks that just need a bit of extra damage, it doesn't matter how much, and Galarian Zigzagoon is also going. Decks like Jolteon that just need a little bit of extra damage, and it doesn't matter how much, they are going to adore this. And then there's a bunch of others that will use it as well. As for Bisharp, I don't know. I want it to be good. I'm giving it 4 Wassies. That might be too low. It's probably going to end up being too high. I think it's fun, but I want to know what you think. So let me know in the comment section, would you? Go nuts! Be nice! And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at TheWassie, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCG Radio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all that good stuff, head on over to patreon.com/PTCG Radio, where you can do exactly that. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.